This is the story of a plant that should never have existed, a creature born from soil older than human memory, a thing that fed not on sunlight, but on blood, breath, and the souls of entire villages. If you're brave enough, stay close. If not, you still won't escape what follows. Because once you hear its name, before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear is one of the darkest secrets buried in Africa's forgotten history. Tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from, because tonight you will want to know you're not listening alone. The vine that drinks the sky will never stop whispering for you. He elders told us never to cross the black ridge at the edge of the savannah, the line of jagged stone that cut the horizon like a scar. Beyond it lay a valley soaked in perpetual shade, a place the old people called Ulema, the hollow where the sun refuses to speak. The stories said that hunters who stepped into that valley returned with empty eyes or did not return at all. But in 1780, the dry season came early, brutal, and merciless. The river shriveled, the game disappeared, and desperation made fools of us all. I was only 17, strong but naive, and I believed that fear was just a shadow the weak carried on their backs. So when my uncle Abeni, the best tracker in our clan, said we had no choice but to seek water beyond the ridge, I followed him without hesitation. We set out at dawn with cracked gourds, worn sandals, and spears whose hafts felt heavier than usual. The wind was still, the kind of stillness that presses on the drums of your ears until you begin to hear your own heartbeat. The ridge stood ahead like a line of dark teeth, biting the sky. As we climbed, Abeni kept glancing to the east, muttering prayers under his breath. He had always been fearless, but his hands trembled whenever he touched the rocks. That should have warned me. That should have made me turn back. But youth believes itself immortal. The moment we crossed the crest, the world changed. The savannah behind us was bathed in gold, but the valley before us was thick with a strange copper haze, as if dusk lived there permanently. A sour, metallic smell floated upward like wet blood left too long in the sun. Trees grew in broken angles, their branches twisting like the fingers of a drowning man. And in the center of the valley, circling an ancient pit, grew a massive tangle of vines so dark they appeared black. Abeni grabbed my wrist. "Do not touch anything," he whispered. His voice trembled. We descended. The air grew heavier, humid, almost syrup-like. The thorn bushes were silent. No insects, no birds. Even the soil felt wrong. Damp, but not fertile. It gave slightly under our feet, like walking on stretched hide. By midday, we reached a stream that trickled weakly from the rocks. The water was clear enough, but it tasted faintly metallic. Still, we filled our gourds, too thirsty to care. Abeni knelt beside me, looked at the strange vines surrounding the clearing, and shook his head. "I have seen this plant before," he murmured. I turned toward him, startled. "Where?" "In a nightmare." He stood and pointed to the thick cluster that curved over the pit. The vines were unlike anything I had ever seen, too smooth, too symmetrical, moving slightly although there was no wind. Abeni's eyes hardened. "We leave now." But the valley had already claimed its first victim. As I stood, something brushed my ankle. I thought it was a root. I kicked my foot back. Then I felt it again, firmer, deliberate, a vine. It slithered toward me like a snake, but it wasn't a snake. It moved in short jerks, as if testing the air, tasting my scent. Its tip bloomed with a pale flower that pulsed like a heartbeat. I stumbled back. A Benny! Before I finished the word, the ground beneath us convulsed. A low, wet groan rose from the pit as the entire thicket shivered. The vines lifted, hundreds of them, like the limbs of some buried beast waking from sleep. A Benny grabbed my arm. "Run!" But the valley wanted us. As we sprinted, the vines lashed outward, tearing into the soil, dragging themselves across the ground with horrifying speed. They grew before our eyes, lengthening, thickening, branching, feeding on something unseen, feeding on us. A vine wrapped around my ankle and pulled me down with terrifying strength. The soil erupted around me. I clawed the earth, screaming. A Benny's spear slashed down, severing the vine. A thick, dark sap spurted out, and a shrill cry like a child screaming underwater echoed across the valley. We ran as the copper haze thickened and the pit behind us roared. Ran until the ridge appeared above us like a distant dream. Ran until my legs collapsed. When we finally crossed the ridge, the sunlight hit us with warm, normal brightness. The air felt alive again. Birds chirped from the trees, but Abeni was not the same. He stared back at the valley, sweat dripping from his brow, eyes wide with a terror I had never seen in him. "That plant," he whispered, "is not meant for our world." I asked what it was. He swallowed, voice cracking. "A god that forgot it died." We returned to our village long after sunset, limping, exhausted, and shaken. The elders gathered around us the moment they saw Abeni's torn clothing and my ankle wrapped in broad leaves. They asked what had attacked us: lion? Hyena? Perhaps a crocodile from a shrinking riverbed. But Abeni only said one word: Ulema. The elders grew silent. Even the fire seemed to dim. My mother rushed to my side, touching my face, as if to make sure I had not turned to smoke on the walk home. "What did you see?" she whispered. I opened my mouth, but Abeni cut in sharply. "Nothing the boy should speak of." That night he went to the elders' purse hut alone. I was not allowed inside, but I heard the low tones of their argument: fear, disbelief, anger. Abeni insisted the valley had awakened. The elders insisted it was merely a drought-born hallucination. But I knew what I had seen. I knew the feel of that vine tightening around my ankle like a clenched fist. I knew something living had dragged itself from that pit. Something that should not have. The first whispers, the nightmares, began the next night. I dreamt of vines crawling over the ridge, tendrils stretching across the savanna, digging into the soil like searching fingers. I dreamt of the pit breathing slow, deep inhalations, as though it were drawing the entire world toward its mouth. When I jolted awake, sweat-soaked and trembling, the night air was still. Too still. Then I heard it, a soft scratching beneath my hut. Not an animal, too rhythmic, too deliberate. I crouched near the floor and pressed my ear against the clay. A faint sound drifted up like roots, dragging through dirt, like someone whispering through a mouth full of soil. I froze. When I told Abeni the next morning, he grabbed my shoulders. Did it speak? I shook my head. "Benny, any mend, with grabnist, with quarter, with it workmand, with quarter, with adaction," it whispered. But I couldn't understand. His expression tightened. "Then it already knows your scent." Before I could ask what that meant, shouts erupted from the goat pens. We rushed out to find the animals dead, every one of them, not torn apart, not eaten, drained. Their bodies shriveled, collapsed like husks, mouths open in silent screams. The ground beneath them bulged, as if something had tunneled under each carcass. Abeni knelt and touched the soil, warm, moist, moving. He stood abruptly. It has spread beyond Ulama. The elders refused to listen at first, but when they lifted the carcasses and saw the holes beneath them, perfect circles lined with thin root-like tendrils that still twitched, they could no longer deny it. It had begun. By the third day, the whispers were everywhere. The warriors heard them near the granaries. Women heard them beneath the fire pits. Children heard them beneath their sleeping mats and woke screaming. The ground itself felt alive. At night, the soil pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. The elders tried burning the spots where the whispers were loudest, but the fire would not catch. The soil simply quivered and puffed out damp dirt until the flames died. Then, the plants began growing. They sprouted overnight, thin, pale shoots with trembling tips that turned toward any warmth, like hungry mouths. Wherever they grew, the earth darkened and softened, as though rotting. One morning, we woke to find a single thick vine coiled around the village drum. The vine pulsed with slow, sickening motions, as though digesting. I approached it cautiously. Abeni pulled me back. "Do not touch it. It learns from everything it touches." The elders gathered around the drum, muttering prayers and curses. The vine released a prayer, sudden burst of sweet, choking scent, like rotting fruit mixed with blood. It curled inward, then snapped toward the nearest elder. The vine moved too fast. It wrapped around the man's arm, burrowing thornless but sharp tips into his skin. The elder screamed as the vine tightened, and color drained from his face. His veins darkened, turning black beneath his skin. Abeni hacked the vine apart with his machete. Thick black sap spurted out, and the vine shrieked. Not a hiss, not a rustle, a shriek, like a starving thing denied its meal. The elder collapsed. His arm was wilted, withered, as though the very life had been sucked from it. He died before sunset. Abeni's warning. The elders demanded we abandon the village. They wanted to flee north to the riverlands, but Abeni said something that froze us all. "You cannot outrun a root." He explained that the plant in Ulema was ancient, older than the ridge, older than the stories, a remnant of something the people who ridge lived before us had tried to bury, something that fed on breath, on blood, on memory. "A plant that hunts," he whispered. I asked the question that had burned in my mind since we fled the valley. "What is it?" He looked at me with an expression I had never seen in him, pure, helpless fear. "It is called Orun Uwe," he said slowly, "the plant that drinks the sky." I waited for an explanation, but he only shook his head. "It is not a plant, it is a being." The children disappear. 2 nights after the elder's death, 3 children went missing. No footprints, no broken fences, no signs of struggle, but the ground near the mango grove was disturbed, swirled, soft, freshly churned, and at the center of the swirl lay a single flower, pale as bone, blooming, beating like a small heart. Abeni knelt beside it and whispered a curse. Then he looked at the rest of us with hollow eyes. "It is calling them into the ground." The mothers collapsed. The rest Warriors gripped their spears with trembling hands. The elders' voices shook as they argued about sending scouts to the ridge, seeking answers, preparing sacrifices. But I felt something worse than fear. I felt the whispering sound rising from the earth beneath my feet, vibrating up through my bones, calling my name. The elders gathered every able-bodied villager in the central clearing. The air tasted of panic, sharp, metallic, thick. The 3 missing children's mothers wailed, their voices carrying across the savannah like torn fabric in the wind. No one slept. No one spoke above a whisper. The soil itself seemed to listen. Abeni rose to speak, his face pale under the torchlight. The children are not lost. They were taken. The ground swallows them. The plant builds its home beneath us. An elder scoffed, voice shaking. Plants do not take children. Abeni lifted a handful of soil from the center of the clearing. It writhed subtle, almost invisible, but real. A slow, twitching movement, like worms beneath skin. Tell me then, he said quietly, what moves this earth? No one answered. The first descent. At dawn, the warriors dug where the soil had swelled beneath the mango grove. The ground was unnaturally soft, as though hollow beneath the surface. I watched from behind Abeni as the men drove sticks into the dirt. One of the sticks sank too fast. A warrior leaned forward. There is a chamber. Before anyone could react, the ground collapsed beneath him. The soil opened like a mouth. He fell with a strangled scream into darkness. The hole sealed behind him almost instantly, soil flowing back into place like liquid muscle. Abeni lunged with his spear, ripping the earth open again. But the tunnel beneath was shifting, sinking, being pulled deeper by something unseen. The warriors' screams grew faint, then they stopped altogether. We stared at the reclosed earth in horror. Abeni turned toward the elders. Now, you understand. It builds passages. It tunnels. It feeds. One of the women fainted. Another began begging the ancestors for mercy. The children clung to their mothers. Even the bravest warriors stood frozen. The ground twitched again. Not roots, not wind, breathing, the night of the knocking. That night, I could not sleep. The hut felt too small, too fragile, as though the soil beneath it could rise at any moment. My ankle throbbed where the vine had grabbed me, pulsing in rhythm with the whispers under the earth. Then I heard it, knocking, soft, slow, repeated. Not from the door, from the floor. Knock, knock, knock. I held my breath. The knocking grew louder, insistent, deliberate. Dirt sifted from the seams of the clay floor. Then I heard a voice, faint, muffled, childlike. Help me. My blood froze. It was one of the missing children. I dropped to my knees and pressed my ear to the floor. The voice came again, choked with soil. It's dark. I can't breathe. I shouted for my mother. For anyone but the moment footsteps approached, the voice stopped. The floor fell silent. Abeni arrived first, torch in hand. He knelt beside me, eyes wide with dread. What did you hear? I told him. He closed his eyes. It uses their voices. It knows what will make us break the earth open. And if we do, we dig ourselves into its mouth. He stood abruptly and placed both hands on the floor. The soil shuddered beneath his palms. It is listening to us. The tunnels revealed. By morning, The village was a graveyard of churned earth. Dozens of small mounds had appeared overnight, like breathing lungs buried beneath the soil. In some places, thin white shoots had grown in spirals, forming symbols no one recognized. The elders finally accepted the truth. They summoned the diviner from the neighboring settlement, an old man named Kofa, scarred by rituals and years of trance walking. He arrived with cowrie shells and a small pot of sacred ash. When he touched the ash to the ground, it sizzled. He hissed sharply, "It is awake." The villagers gathered in a tense circle. Kofa closed his eyes. "This being, this Oren Yue, is not of the forests, not of the earth we know. It fell from the sky long ago. The ancestors fought it, burned it, buried it, but they never killed it." Abeni nodded grimly. "We saw its pit." Kofa's lips tightened. "You did more than see it. You fed it. It tasted your blood in the valley." All eyes turned to me. My ankle burned. I felt the whispering beneath my skin. Kofa opened a leather pouch and removed a shard of ochre stone. He pressed it against the ground. The soil split just slightly, revealing a hollow beneath, lined with pale roots pulsing like veins. The villagers gasped. Abeni leaned closer. "Rootways." Kofa nodded. "Tunnels. Many tunnels. They spread like a web beneath us. The children are inside." My heart clenched. "Alive? For now," Kofa said quietly. "But not for long. It drains slowly. It learns from them. Their fear feeds it." He touched the soil again. "It wants something more than food." His voice dropped. "It wants form." The first attempt at rescue against the elders' protests, Abeni insisted that we attempt to enter one of the newly exposed tunnels before it fully sealed. He selected 5 warriors, men swift and silent, trained in moving through caves and ravines. I begged to go. Abeni refused. "You carry its mark. You step inside, and the plant will close around you like hands around a throat." He wasn't wrong. My ankle throbbed like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. The warriors approached the hole Kofa had brushed open. It pulsed slightly, as though resisting their presence. Kofa muttered a chant and sprinkled ash around the opening. The earth flinched away from the ash, revealing a dark, narrow shaft leading into the underground. A faint cry echoed up. A child's voice, weak, broken, begging. One warrior descended. Another followed. A third knelt to enter. The ground snapped shut. Fast, violent. The remaining 2 warriors jumped back as the soil surged upward, choking off the tunnel with unbelievable speed. Abeni thrust his spear into the ground, but the soil hardened instantly, like drying clay. One of the warriors inside screamed shrill, panicked, abruptly cut short. The villagers fled backward. The ground settled. Abeni stared at the sealed earth, breath shaking. "It's toying with us." Kofa nodded gravely. "It will not let us choose how this ends. It will choose for us. The night." The plant spoke. "We buried no bodies that evening, because there were none left to bury." The plant had taken them into the ground. The sun set red, sinking into the savannah like a glowing wound. Silence lay over the village like a suffocating cloth. Then, as the fires dimmed, every sound vanished. No wind, no insects, no footsteps, no voices. And then the ground spoke. A deep, resonant pulse vibrated the earth, one steady thrum that echoed through every hut. The villagers gasped as cups rattled, bowls slid, and dust fell from rafters. The soil beneath the central clearing rose slightly bulging into a mound that pulsed like a gigantic heart. Then we heard it. A voice, not human, not plant, something between. It filled the village, coming from everywhere and nowhere. I remember hunger. Abeni grabbed my arm. Kofa stumbled backward, face drained of color. The voice deepened. You walk above me. You breathe what was mine. The ground cracked. Hair-thin roots crawled from the fissures, twitching like antennae. I drank the sky once. I will drink again. The mound swelled, split. Something began to crawl out of the earth. The villagers screamed. Abeni pulled me behind him, spear raised. Kofa fell to his knees, whispering a prayer through clenched teeth. And the plant that drinks the sky rose from its slumber. The fourth night after the disappearances was the night our village began to die. Abeni had barely slept since the children vanished, and neither had I. Every sunset seemed to thicken the air, filling it with a tension like the moment before lightning strikes. The soil quivered in faint pulses, and the whispering beneath our huts grew louder, no longer murmurs, but distinct rhythms, as though something enormous and patient was breathing below us. That night, a storm gathered over the horizon, lightless thunder, flickering without rain. Abeni stood outside my hut as the sky rumbled. You feel it? He whispered. I nodded. The ground beneath my feet thrummed, like a drum stretched too tight. It will come tonight. His words hollowed my bones. The drums of the soil. Just after midnight, the first screams came from the far end of the village, sharp, high-pitched, and abruptly silenced. Warriors sprinted, past us with spears and torches. The storm wind picked up, throwing dust across the huts. Abeni and I followed the shouts until we reached the granary. What we found was worse than death. The granary floor had collapsed inward, forming a perfectly round pit about the width of a man's outstretched arms. Fine tendrils, hair-thin but moving, pulsed along the inner walls like veins. Something warm and humid breathed out from the hole. And beside the pit lay a pile of clothes, the garments of Suna, one of the missing children. The clothes were dry, recently removed, as if she had stepped out of them before disappearing into the ground. But she was gone, completely gone. Abeni grabbed my arm. Back away, slowly. The tendrils inside the pit quivered, sensing movement above them. The ground growled. Yes, growled. A low, guttural vibration that made our legs tremble, made the torches flicker, and gutters of smoke tear sideways. Then, without warning, the entire pit lunged upward. Not the soil, not the tendrils, but something beneath them. A coil of thick vine, longer than any serpent I had ever seen, shot upward like a spear. A warrior screamed as it struck him through the chest, lifting him into the air. The vine wrapped around him, squeezing, until his bones popped like cracking wood. Then it dragged him into the pit. The soil swallowed him whole. The whispering surged into a harsh, murmuring chant, like hundreds of voices speaking without mouths. The warriors fled. The tunnels beneath us. We fell back to the center of the village, all torches raised, forming a trembling circle of light. The elders shouted frantic prayers. Mothers clutched their children. The wind carried dust and sparks as the unseen storm flickered overhead. The soil shifted again, this time beneath all of us. Abeni pressed 2 fingers to the ground. Tunnels, he whispered. They run beneath every hut. I swallowed hard. Why? Why would it node? Dig beneath us. He stared at the shifting earth. To learn our patterns, to know where we sleep, to choose who it will take. A high, keening sound rose from the granary pit, almost human. A child's cry. "Suna!" someone screamed. Her mother ran toward the pit before anyone could stop her. Abeni and I sprinted after her. But when she reached the edge, she did not find her daughter. She found her daughter's face carved into the wood of the granary wall. Not drawn, not painted. Grown. A face formed from bark and root, eyes closed, mouth twisted in terror. Her voice still echoed faintly, muffled, as though buried deep. The mother collapsed, wailing, but her wails were drowned as more cries erupted from the east huts, the west fence, the cattle pens. Faces. Children's faces, etched by roots into walls, doors, and even the soil itself, whispering, crying, begging. Abeni clenched his teeth. It wants to be worshipped. The plant was imitating the phrase. Lost children imprinting them onto wood and soil like grotesque warnings or promises. The hollowed warrior. Then we heard another scream. This one gurgled, choked. Near the well, a warrior staggered toward the torch circle. His spear was missing, and his body was wrong. His chest cavity caved and pressed outward in strange bulges. His skin pulsed. Thorn-like shapes rippled beneath it. He fell to his knees, clutching at the air, mouth opening and closing without sound. Abeni lifted his torch. "Stay back!" The warrior extended one trembling hand. A vine tip pushed through his palm. I gagged as thin vines broke through his neck, shoulders, and ribs, writhing outward like worms seeking fresh soil. His eyes rolled back. His jaw dislocated with a wet crack. And then, with a scream that did not come from his throat, but from the vines inside him, his body split open. Dozens of thin, needle-like tendrils burst out, feeling, seeking, tasting the air. Warrior's hollowed skin collapsed like a drained sack. The vines slithered away into the soil, disappearing soundlessly. Abeni whispered, voice shaking, "It is growing faster, feeding faster." I could not speak. My mouth had gone dry as bone dust. The plant's message. The whispering surged louder. No longer murmuring, now a clear, chilling chorus rising from beneath the earth. It spoke in broken fragments. Roots. Deeper. Give. Breath. Hunger. Sky. The elders fell to their knees, clutching their ears. Thunder cracked above us. I stared at Abeni. "It's speaking." He nodded grimly. "It has learned our language." The ground bulged. Not a pit, not a tunnel. A massive swell of earth, rising slowly, methodically, like the back of something colossal pushing upward. The whispering changed deeper, more resonant, like a god waking. We stumbled backward as a massive root thicker than the trunk of the tallest baobab emerged from the ground, its surface trembling with pulsing veins. Smaller vines spread outward like spider legs. The villagers screamed. Abeni grabbed my arm. "It's not attacking yet." "What is it doing?" He stared at the pulsing mass with dread. "It's looking." Then the vines lifted, turned, and pointed toward me. "Why me?" I choked. Abeni's jaw clenched. "Because it marked you in the valley. It tasted your blood. The call beneath my skin. My ankle, the one the vine had grabbed, began to throb." I looked down. The skin around the old vine mark darkened, turning green-black. The flesh pulsed. Something moved beneath the skin. a tiny vine, growing. I screamed. Abeni ripped a knife from his belt and seized my leg. But before he could cut, the whispering surged. Mine. The vines shot upward, dozens of them, all aimed at me. Abeni pulled me backward, shouting for the warriors to defend. But the vines moved with terrifying speed, slashing through the air, ripping through huts and the ground. I ran, limping, stumbling. I ran. Behind me, screams filled the night, mingling with the guttural hum of the plant. But the vines did not chase the others. They chased only me. Night had fallen by the time we reached the ridge again, but the sky behind us burned with a sickly green glow. The plant was no longer hiding. The valley of Ulema pulsed like a living wound, and the sound rising from it was no longer a whisper. It was a chant. Rhythmic, hollow, inhuman, as if thousands of mouths buried beneath the soil were all breathing in unison. Abeni staggered beside me, blood dripping from his torn shoulder where the vine had bitten into him. Every few minutes his body jerked, as though something inside him was pulling the strings of his muscles. A thin, dark line crept up his veins toward his chest. "We don't have long," he rasped. The children we came to rescue were somewhere inside the root, tunnels beneath Ulema. If we didn't reach them before the plant completed, whatever ritual it was preparing, they would never be children again, they would be vessels. Soil. Fertilizer. We descended into the valley for the final time. The ground opened for us as if expecting our arrival. The soil split with a wet sigh, revealing a wide, spiraling tunnel lined with pulsing roots. Warm air drifted out, wet, foul, breathing. Abeni held his machete tightly. "Stay behind me. Whatever you see, do not speak to it." We entered. The tunnels writhed with life. Roots shifted beneath our feet like muscles. Walls tightened and loosened in slow, rhythmic contractions, as if the valley itself were inhaling and exhaling. Whispers followed us. Sometimes they sounded like children. Sometimes they sounded like our own voices. After what felt like hours, we reached a cavern so massive it felt like the ribs of a giant. In the center hung the children alive, but bound with vines that fed into their bodies like umbilical cords. Abeni moved first, slicing the nearest vine. The plant reacted instantly. A deep roar, wet, ancient, furious, rumbled through the cavern, shaking dirt loose from the ceiling. Then it appeared. The creature was not a single plant. It was a fused mass of tendrils, roots, vines, and hardened bark shaped vaguely like a torso hunched over the pit that birthed it. Its head was a cluster of flowers that opened and closed like mouths, each dripping black sap. When it spoke not in words, but in thoughts shoved into our bones. "You return. The seated one. The marked one. Feed us." Abeni choked, clutching his chest as the dark veins reached his neck. It marked me that day," he gasped. "I felt it enter. I felt it waiting. His skin split at the shoulders. Small vines pushed through his pores like newborn limbs. He dropped to his knees, screaming. The old root towered over him, flowers widening, tendrils writhing. Greedily, it meant to reclaim him, to consume him, to grow through him. I rushed forward, slashing wildly at the vines, holding the children. Each cut produced another shriek from the creature. Its roots lashed toward me like whips, tearing across my arms and legs. "Go!" Abeni roared. His voice trembled with pain but held fierce command. "You must burn the heart." "What heart?" I shouted, bleeding. He pointed to the center of the cavern where a mound of black vines pulsed around a glowing core, bright and molten like a small sun buried in the roots. "The heart of Oren Uwe," he said. "Burn it, and the valley dies." "Come with me," I begged. Abeni shook his head. "It already lives inside me. I am its soil now. But you are still clean." His eyes softened just for a moment. "Go, nephew." Then the old root tightened its hold on him, dragging him upward. His scream echoed through the cavern, but he kept swinging his machete, cutting deep gashes into the monster, even as it consumed him. I seized a burning torch from the chamber wall, one the creature had grown itself, as if mocking fire, and sprinted toward the pulsing heart. The ground convulsed. The roots rose like spears. One pierced my thigh, another sliced my shoulder, but I kept running. As I reached the heart, the whispers turned to desperate pleading. "We can give you life. We can live in you. We can be one." I drove the torch deep into the glowing core. The effect was instant. Light burst outward, blinding and violent. The heart screamed an impossible, roaring wail that shook the valley above and split the cavern walls. The roots convulsed, thrashing like dying serpents. Flowers exploded, spraying black sap that burned like acid. The children fell free as the vines crumbled around them. The cavern began to collapse. I crawled toward them, pulling them toward the tunnel entrance. The ground split and surged, but the vines were dying, curling inward, shriveling, turning to ash. The last thing I saw before the cavern fell was Abeni half consumed, half human, smiling through the agony as the old root burned around him. He bowed his head in one final act of defiance before the monster engulfed him and crumbled into dust. I carried the youngest child in my arms as we scrambled out of the collapsing valley. The ridge loomed ahead, and behind us the land screamed one last time. Then Ulema fell silent, truly silent. For the first time in centuries, the villagers gathered around us as we emerged from the ridge. Mothers clutched their rescued children with trembling arms. Elders bowed their heads in mourning for those lost. The warriors stared at the now dead horizon, their faces pale with awe and grief. The valley was gone, collapsed, buried, erased. But the soil beneath our village still remembers. Even now, years later, when the wind is still or the night too quiet, I sometimes feel the earth shift beneath my feet. Not violently, just enough to remind me, roots never truly die. They wait, they listen, they learn. And sometimes, in dreams, I see Abeni standing at the edge of Ulema's grave, his eyes dark, his veins black, his voice a whisper through the soil. Do not forget, what you bury will always remember you. The valley sleeps, but sleep is not death, and beneath the earth, something is still breathing. Thank you for watching.